Now we're going to move on to another area where FOR SA is also involved. We are generally more an organization that looks to influence bad laws before they're passed, but also come the unfortunate time when a bad law has been passed, then we would, by necessity, defend people who fall foul of that law. And one of the cases that we've been involved with, although we're not officially in the case as yet, but we've been involved with it in another sense from the beginning, is a case of the Beloftebos wedding venue. And if you haven't heard of this case, I'm just going to give you the brief background of it. Beloftebos is a farm owned by Andries and Coia de Villiers, just outside of Stanford. And they have a passion for marriage. They love it. They are a wonderful Christian couple. They not only believe in the institution of marriage, but they also are very committed to the fact that it is a beautiful representation of Christ as the groom with the church as his bride. And that was why they became involved in converting their farm and building facilities to make it a venue where people can get married. And this had been going on for some time. One day, a same-sex couple called them and said they would like to organize their wedding at their venue. And very graciously, Coia and Andries de Villiers declined because, as they explained, look, everybody is welcome to our property. And they've had multiple events where people have been welcome. It doesn't matter what sex, gender, expression you may have, or anything else for that matter. Everybody's welcome. But they drew the line by saying that there are some events, some things that they will not actually allow their venue to be used for. For example, they would not allow a Halloween party. They would not allow a divorce party. They would not allow some trance dance party or weekend to take place there. And so they've been very clear about that. But they graciously said that please understand and respect that this is something that we cannot, in good conscience, celebrate with you because it is simply contrary to our own beliefs and our conscience does not permit us to celebrate. But, please, we understand in our constitutional democracy, love who you want to love, live how you want to live. And of course, you're entitled to get married, but just please don't force us to celebrate this with you. Well, this is one of the problems because immediately the South African Human Rights Commission were alerted. There was a big uproar about it. And the Human Rights Commission then got involved in the case. Now, here's part one of the unfairness. The Human Rights Commission is an institution of state funded by you and my taxpayer money. When they open a lawsuit against you, and let's supposing that lawsuit, as in this one, could potentially go right the way through the court structures from the High Court to the Supreme Court of Appeal to the Constitutional Court, that is all funded without any problem or difficulty by the taxpayer. In other words, they have bottomless pockets. But of course, if you're in the target, if you're on the other end of that, then you have to defend yourself. And by the time a case gets through that legal process to the Constitutional Court, it could easily have cost up to 10 million rand. And who knows, there are also these things called cost orders, which potentially, if they're made against you, means that you have to pick up the fees and the costs of the other people as well. In other words, the whole process can be financially ruinous. So that is a very unfair element of it. It is particularly unfair because, as I said, the reason why they find themselves in the crosshairs is simply because of what they believe. This is a belief that marriage is between one man and one woman that has been held by most religions, and certainly the Christian faith, for the past 2,000 years. And it is not, which is the accusation that is often brought against them in a way of trying to equalize it, an issue of that, well, it's the equivalent of racism. It's comparable to racial discrimination. But that analogy is flawed because, as everybody should know, race is an immutable characteristic. It's the color of your skin. It's the color of your eyes. There's nothing that you can do about it. But it has no moral or religious dimension. Whereas, of course, marriage is a deeply theological institution and has a very specific spiritual significance. So actually forcing, which is what this would potentially do, a Christian venue to host a same-sex wedding is basically not at all the same as, say, requiring a restaurant to serve all customers equally. It's more akin to demanding that, say, a Muslim butcher should sell pork, or that, say, a Jewish baker should create some cake decorated with something that mocks the Jewish faith. They are not preventing anybody, the Villiers family, from having a same-sex wedding. They're simply, as I said, asking that their own religious freedom rights be respected. And this is where things get very tricky, because the Constitutional Court has said that there is no hierarchy of human rights. In other words, rights aren't graded. It's not that your sexual orientation is somehow higher than your religious freedom. In fact, they've said there is no hierarchy. They should all be equal. But this is where the challenge comes in with a piece of legislation that is concerning because it unfairly biases that equation. If you can show under the Equality Act, this is the act under which this case has been brought, that you have discriminated, it is deemed to be unfair. So as soon as you can show discrimination, it's unfair. And now you, as the one who's now accused of discriminating it, you have to now justify the discrimination. And there's a test set out in the Equality Act. And that test is, among other things, are you from a previously or historically disadvantaged community or sector of the community? And if the answer is yes, boom, your right is now elevated. So, of course, if it's a question of LGBT community versus Christians, clearly you have a bias, and that is deeply problematic. But the bottom line is that this is a fundamentally unfair process, and it is very much pitched and aimed at effectively silencing, even punishing people for the faith that they hold. Interestingly enough, the parties in the case, and there's now been new movement in this case, by the way, which is why we're raising it again, that there was a case management meeting where the parties that are in the case, that would be the Human Rights Commission, the Commission for Gender Equality, the Department of Justice, you've got 3 government departments or divisions here involved in this case, had a case management meeting. They didn't even inform the lawyers of the Beloftebos case that this was happening. But one party also now wants to get involved, and that is another same-sex couple. And what they're saying is that they want 2 million rands worth of damages for the pain and suffering that they believe that they have experienced. And the reason, and this is their argument, they say, had the Beloftebos owners, and I'm quoting, kept their opinions and beliefs to themselves, there would be no concern. Problem arises because they brought their opinions and beliefs into the public sphere. In other words, they want to punish the owners of the venue because they dared to express their belief, which is absolutely their constitutional right. So this is a problematic case. We are watching it closely. We're not involved in the case yet. Come the day, we may well enter as a friend of the court to bring, of course, the religious freedom dimensions that is our area of expertise. But it's one of those irreconcilable problems. The de Villiers family will not and should not ever apologize for the beliefs that they hold and hold sincerely and hold dearly. They had no intention of being bigoted or nasty or unpleasant or critical or anything towards the LGBTIQ plus community. They simply wanted to be allowed to express their faith, and they will not apologize. Now, if they're found to have been in breach of this law, then typically what will happen is they will be forced to make a public apology, which they won't do, and or they'll be fined, which they won't pay, and then they're going to face the consequences. And ultimately, it could end up with them in jail, literally, for contempt of court, ultimately. And so you're actually creating a martyr, if you like, a very reluctant martyr, I should hasten to say, simply because these ideologies are now conflicting, and they're using South African law, backed by the state, I have to say, unfortunately, to basically enforce conformity to their position and viewpoint. That's why it's such a key religious freedom issue. That's why we're involved in it. And that's why we all need to stand together in prayer and in support of the de Villiers family as they go through this ordeal. It's been 8 years, I should say, 8 years. Punishment, unfortunately, is often in the process. It's designed to set an example, to say it could be you next. And that is very concerning. That's the chill factor, so to speak. But I believe we need to keep true to ourselves, true to our faith, and to keep speaking out and to not allow these things to deter us from saying and believing and expressing what we believe is our truth.
Good day. This is Liesl Pretorius, Head of Legal at Freedom of Religion South Africa. Remember to like and subscribe this video and then click on the subscribe button. That way you make sure that you will never miss our videos and important updates on issues affecting religious freedom.